the world's most cautious brand, just started testing chips from a company the Pentagon calls a Chinese military supplier. 7 U.S. senators found out and gave Apple 6 days to explain itself. Here's the shortage that pushed Apple this far, and the twist that might make the whole gamble pointless. First, the shortage that started all of this. Standard memory prices jumped 55 to 60% in early 2026. AI servers are eating the world's DRAM supply, and Apple thinks the squeeze lasts through 2027. The company on the other side of that squeeze is Micron, America's only major memory maker. Its gross margin jumped from 39% to 85% in a single year, on record quarterly revenue of $41.5 billion. Apple's take: Micron is price gouging on margins that high, so Apple quietly began testing DRAM from CXMT, a Chinese state-linked manufacturer, for iPhones and MacBooks. For the most cautious brand in consumer electronics, that's a strange risk to take over a commodity part. To understand why, you have to see exactly who CXMT and YMTC are, and why Washington already has a name for it. Next, the red lines Washington already drew. Both companies carry formal U.S. designations. The Pentagon lists CXMT and YMTC as Chinese military companies under Section 1260H. The Commerce Department put YMTC on its entity list back in 2022. State-owned shareholders held over 35% of CXMT before its planned Shanghai listing. The company only turned profitable once the global shortage hit, after years of losses covered by state capital. The senator's letter draws a direct line to a familiar playbook: state-subsidized capacity that undercuts market prices, drives out Western producers, and leaves buyers dependent on a single supplier. They point to steel, batteries, and shipbuilding as the same pattern playing out before. This isn't Apple's first time at this exact table. In 2022, Apple evaluated YMTC NAND flash for the iPhone. After congressional scrutiny, the company backed off entirely. So this is a rerun with higher stakes. Last time, political pressure alone was enough to end it. The senators are betting the same lever still works. Which brings us to the letter itself. 7 senators signed it on July 29th, 4 Republicans, 3 Democrats, led by Jim Banks and Chuck Schumer. When national security crosses party lines this cleanly, that's worth noticing on its own. They asked 7 direct questions. Will Apple commit to 0 CXMT or YMTC parts anywhere in the world? What's the current testing status? And pointedly, has Apple even asked its U.S. suppliers for more supply first? That last one is the sharpest question in the letter. It's not really about China. It's asking whether Apple exhausted its American options before reaching for a banned supplier. There's already a hard deadline buried in federal law. Starting December 2027, the government itself is barred from buying any product built with CXMT or YMTC chips. The Commerce Secretary didn't hedge either. Asked directly whether he told Apple this himself, Howard Lutnick answered in one word, plainly: not a diplomatic hedge. A flat no, but there's a catch. The law can't actually stop this. Export licenses only trigger when a U.S. company shares custom design specs with a Chinese factory. Standard memory needs almost no customization. Apple's own COO said so. Buy it off the shelf, and no license is required at all. That's why Lutnick's warning is political, not legal. The regulation Washington actually has doesn't reach a commodity purchase, so pressure and public scrutiny are the only tools left on the table. Micron isn't sitting quietly either. It's warned officials this could gut the domestic industry the same way China gutted steel and shipbuilding, while pointing to its own $6.1 billion in CHIPS Act funding for new fabs in Idaho and New York. But that new capacity isn't fast. Micron's Clay, New York fab was announced back in 2022 during the last chip shortage panic. It still won't be ready until 2030, long after this current shortage is supposed to have already passed. And that's the trap underneath this whole fight. Apple needs memory now. The domestic fix everyone's pointing to arrives most of a decade from now. That gap is exactly wide enough for Apple to gamble on China in between. So here's the twist that might make all of this moot. As of this month, CXMT has already maxed out its production for the year, prioritizing ByteDance, Tencent, and Xiaomi first. And its prices now sit level with, sometimes above, Micron, SK Hynix, and Samsung. So, Apple may be risking a fight with the Senate, its own government's export posture, and a rerun of 2022 for a supplier that can't spare the chips and won't beat the price. 6 days from now, Apple has to explain that math in writing